Hello and welcome back to the Eyes of O Gaming channel for another game review. Today we're taking a look at The Evil Within 2. We've previously already reviewed The Evil Within and this game is the sequel to it. So if you prefer to start with that game, I'll make sure that there's a pop-up or link somewhere for you. The Evil Within 2 is a survival horror game which released all the way back in 2017. This one was published by Bethesda and developed by Tango Gameworks. To be honest, I mostly only saw people talking negatively about this game, comparing it to the first entry in the series, but of course I never just accept what other people say, and I wanted to try for myself to see if it was truly a downgrade or if I disagree with the criticism and think it holds up on its own. Regardless, hopefully we can help you to answer the most important question asked in this review series. Is this one worth it for you? Let's get into it. So I'm going to assume that you already played the first game in the series, or at least don't mind spoilers for it. If you prefer to start there, like I mentioned, I've already covered The Evil Within, and I'll make sure that there's some kind of a link or a pop-up for you. Okay, so this game is going to take place 3 years after the end of The Evil Within, and the player is going to take on the role of Sebastian Castellanos. However, he's now left the Crimson City Police. The game opens up by showing us that Sebastian is still completely destroyed inside due to his daughter Lily's demise in a house fire and his wife leaving him. As a result of this, as well as the events that took place in the first game, which seemed to be the final nail, he is just spiraling out at this point, just relying on other substances to relieve the pain that he's in. While in the opening scenes, he's recruited by his former partner from The Evil Within, Julie Kidman, to come back with her to the Mobius facility. Kidman is a Mobius agent and informs Sebastian that his daughter is still alive and he needs to come with her in order to save her. Essentially, this all ends up with Sebastian being hooked into a simulation or STEM system where he needs to deal with the horrors, both new and those similar to The Evil Within, in order to track down and save his daughter. The simulation is of a fictional small American town called Union. When he arrives, Mobius agents have already been deployed into Union after they lost control of the simulation, but contact with the agents has since been lost. Since Sebastian is the most experienced with surviving in these situations, and he is driven to save his daughter, he seems to be the best choice to set things right. The Evil Within 2 is a survival horror game which emphasizes resource management and stealth. Personally, I found that the combat starts out actually pretty difficult, but it drops off really quickly as the game continues and you gain abilities. So the stealth aspects are definitely more important early on. We also have some open world exploration. It's not a fully open world game, but instead it's broken into zones which are open for you to explore, complete missions in, and gather additional resources. The Evil Within 2 also has a crafting system built in, and this allows you to craft ammo, health items, or weapon upgrades using materials which you found in the environment. The combat system includes melee as well as a variety of firearms, as well as the unique feeling Warden crossbow, which has various types of bolts you can use such as freezing, shocking, or smoke. The interesting aspect with that is that you can use the environment in conjunction with some of the bolts, such as using shock bolts with bodies of water. There's also a whole upgrade and skill tree system. Essentially, when you defeat enemies, you can collect green gel, which is used to unlock abilities in different categories. The different categories you have to upgrade in are health, athleticism, recovery, stealth, and combat. Basically, you just choose different skills which align with your playstyle. If you dump a bunch of points into combat, you can certainly shift this from a stealth-focused game to a more standard combat game. But of course, you can choose instead to go down the stealth route. It's up to the player. We also have a bunch of side missions as well given by NPCs, which are typically going to be a good idea to complete in order to gain that green gel and other resources. As you play through the zones, you look for safe houses, which will allow you to save the game and access workbenches and skill upgrade areas. I think that's about all you really need to know. There's other things such as collectibles, locker keys that can get you gear, and there's other lore collectibles. But in terms of the general gameplay mechanics, I think you should have a pretty good idea. Again, it's going to feel pretty similar to The Evil Within, but you do have more ability to explore the areas, and it feels a little bit less linear, though it's still going to be a fairly linear experience overall. The game also expands a little bit more with things like crafting and deeper skill upgrade trees, but the overall feel will be very similar. Maybe a little less esoteric and more grounded, but still similar. So as with most sequels, the obvious comparison is in the previous release. In this case, we do have a lot that is similar. The story is going to be continuing on telling the next chapter and events surrounding Sebastian Castellanos and Mobius, and the world that this all takes place in. The enemies are going to feel very familiar, though with some new additions as well. We've also had an expected improvement in graphics and sound from the previous release. Some other differences that you're going to notice is the move from a very linear style to a more open world experience with explorable zones. There's also going to be a little bit less dependence on stealth, though it is still very important, especially in the early game. We have crafting now and the option for skill development, and in terms of the story, it feels more like an emotional and a little bit more grounded horror experience, rather than that intense cryptic horror of the first. So other than the first game, we could look to, say, the Resident Evil games. Third-person survival horror, we've got some resource management, crafting, and a tense style of combat. The Dead Space franchise, really for the same sort of blend of survival horror, crafting, and combat style. Dead Space was also more of a linear style, so it could have more in common with the first Evil Within, and so that can also be used to contrast with the Evil Within too. A common concept with these style of horror games is the linear story and progression. Again, the Evil Within 2 does have a fairly linear mission progression, but it does include that open world for exploration and gathering resources, so that you can then craft more ammo or other usable items. This part of the gameplay loop may add some immersion for some players, but it could also be an unnecessary time filler depending on how you feel about it. The Warden crossbow is also a fairly unique weapon in the game, offering a few different types of bolts that can be used to dynamically change up the engagements. I didn't really run into much for bugs or performance issues while playing through. I did find some of the bosses to be a little annoying, and as a result I found that they can be really easily cheesed in order to pass through them if you're running into some difficulty. There's actually a number of different areas where you can game or cheese it in order to make the situation much easier. I even made and uploaded a video on passing through an otherwise difficult zone by cheesing the game. I'll also make sure that there's a link or pop-up for that one if you're interested in checking it out. I think it's a pretty good example of what I mean by easily being able to exploit the game to pass through bosses or encounters more easily. It's just that there's a number of these exploits that are actually really easy to stumble across in the game. So this is obviously going to be just my opinion, but I feel like both the graphics and sound in this game are done really well and hold up really well today. I played with headphones on for a lot of it and thought that the audio was done quite well, adding to the experience. Environments are going to feel fairly consistent within a zone, but you do get to go to a few different areas with their own style, which keeps things feeling a little bit more fresh. As usual, just use the gameplay footage to see if this works for you, and as I said, I think the sound is done really well in game, and the dialogue is pretty decent as well. So I'll just play a few examples of the general audio, as well as some of the dialogue so that you make up your own mind on how it sounds.
What the? You gotta be kidding me.
Happiness for one is happiness for all. This machine, this miracle, will allow our species to achieve greatness.
Okay, so we've done with the objective part of the review. Now we're just going to get into the subjective opinion part. I always like to just give a really quick disclaimer that whether or not I like the game, it doesn't mean that you will or won't. You should use the first part of the review to decide that. Right now, I'm just going to give my own opinion and my own experience. It's just for fun, and they make different games for different people with different tastes. Also, as a side note, I don't use any kind of rating system like a number out of 10 or stars or anything like that, because I think it's a waste of time for this kind of media. Okay, so to answer the question, in the typically most skipped to part of my reviews, did I enjoy The Evil Within 2?
Groovy.
Yeah, I liked it quite a bit. I see a bunch of people online hating on this game, which I think is a real shame. A lot of the criticism seems to be that The Evil Within 2 went for a more standard horror style, rather than sticking to the first one's cryptic or esoteric horror. Essentially, most of the negativity comes from the feeling that it, as is the case with criticism for most sequels, went for a much more generic approach than it previously had in order to appeal to a wider audience. Personally, I really liked both entries in this franchise. I had a number of comments on the video for the first Evil Within saying not even to bother with the second, and so I had lower expectations coming in. Again, personally, I'm not really sure it's justified. If I had to choose, I might say that the first is better overall, but it's mostly just because the story and world is fresh. And so of course when you're experiencing these things, it's all coming at you as a new thing. So obviously you're not going to get this kind of thing from a sequel unless they turn everything on its head in order to subvert expectations. Call me old-fashioned, but I've never been a huge fan of this approach. If it works and it hasn't been oversaturated, why not just keep going with a good thing? Some of the jump scare horror is pretty obvious and you can see it coming from a mile away, but I feel like that is also a common critique of most horror games, even beloved ones. I liked the first Evil Within for its strangeness and unique approach regarding the story it was telling, but I also appreciate the style that they're going for in the sequel. It's definitely more grounded, and you can connect with the character of Sebastian in a more empathetic way, I find. They really want to dive into his emotional state and why he is the way he is and how he got to this point, and I think that it was a good choice. In a lot of ways, I kind of feel like this whole situation is a repeat of Dead Space. People love the first one and equally love to trash on the sequels. And I just kind of feel like I'm an outlier, liking both the first and the sequels while understanding that as much as many things remain the same, some changes did need to be made, but they're not going so far as to completely rewrite everything, so I think it's still pretty good. As the Evil Within 2 progresses through, you seem to transition from the slower paced stealth game to more of an action shooter in a horror world, and honestly, I like both. Part of me kind of prefers the latter anyway, so I'm good with it. So the summary of all that word salad is basically that it seems like a lot of the criticism comes from the change from a very unique style of world and story in the first game to the sequel being more of a conventional horror game set in the same universe as the first. Does that mean that this is a significant downgrade? Well, it depends on the player. If you like horror games, I think this is a very solid title to pick up. If you like the first and want more of it, and you don't mind that shift to something more conventional and a little less cryptic, I think you're going to be pleased with this one. But regardless, I hope you enjoyed this look at The Evil Within 2. Have you already played through this one? Let me know down in the comments what you thought and if you agree or disagree with my own opinion. If the video was helpful or entertaining, please give it a like and also consider subscribing to the channel. I post a variety of gaming content, not just reviews like this, but also walkthroughs and other gaming stuff, and I'd love to have you join the community and help direct the future of the channel. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch today, and until next time, take care.
Kidman?
Hello, Sebastian. It's been a long time.
3 years. I've been trying to track you down for 3 years.
And you thought you'd find me at the bottom of an empty bottle.